Okay, hold on. Before you freak out, I know what you're thinking. 100. Really? 100 things I missed in the 18-second teaser. Really? Give me a few or more minutes of your time and I'll show you. I'm not pulling this out of my butt. What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video. Today we're going to be doing my breakdown for the Godzilla Minus One teaser 2. This is the teaser for the upcoming trailer, which should be dropping just very shortly. Just a little over a day away and we've got it. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down that teaser, and I know it seems crazy, but that teaser was so jam-packed with information in those 17 seconds that I'm going to have to go through all of what we've got here. And in this video, we'll be talking about the story of the movie. We'll be talking about some of the filmmaking details, and we will especially be covering our history because this teaser was filled with real world history and historical connections that provide a new context to what this movie will be. I hope you join me on this journey, and I hope you enjoy. Really quickly before we begin, I feel like this is as good of a place as any to show off the fact that while I was at Anime Matsuri 2023 in Houston, Texas, I worked with the artist Shinji Nishikawa, who is a concept artist from Godzilla films. He's been working on Godzilla films officially since 1989, and I commissioned from him, and he made for me his very first ever Godzilla Minus One. I'm going to show this thing off in more detail in videos to come, but I just wanted to show it off here because I felt like this is as good of a place as any to show something as special as this off. His very first ever Godzilla Minus One. It is an honor to own. Let's get on with it. Huge thank you to Nishikawa-san for that. I really love it. Also, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. That's right, I'm doing this at the top now. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. The Patreon is what's keeping this channel running and is making sure I can keep making videos like this for you, so I wanted to give them a shout out. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. Alright, let's do it. The Godzilla Minus One teaser 2 dropped. It's officially posted on YouTube. You can go check it out now. I have a feeling in about 30-ish hours it'll be gone and replaced with the actual full-length trailer. Toho announced this teaser on Twitter, as did the director Takashi Yamazaki, who announced that the trailer's coming soon. The trailer many of us saw and noticed that it is very similar to Godzilla 2014. Amongst these were Japanese fans including Exodus Solidus, who called out the 2014 parallels, as did GFWAVP100. I've also got some analysis in this video from some other people who I'm going to be giving shout outs to, so let's just get into this thing and go through all of the incredible details jam-packed within this teaser. A little over 100 details that were exciting enough to discover in this trailer. Let's get into it. Starting with the thumbnail. The thumbnail reads on the side, "Advanced Notice." The thumbnail shows an overhead wide shot of Godzilla's feet stomping down in the street, and you can clearly peek a glimpse at his tail dragging behind his foot. There is a path of destruction behind him, including a flipped tram, and in front of him, crowds of people are fleeing, and what appears to be flipped or abandoned cars scatter the street. Most likely these flipped cars come from him kicking them or smashing through a bridge. Under his foot you can see what appears to be a person beneath his center toe. This seems to be a Godzilla movie where Godzilla kills people on screen, which does not happen often and would actually be to the dismay of original Godzilla director Ishiro Honda, who did not like to show human violence on screen directly. Although it's worth noting the original Godzilla movie is one of the few Godzilla films to show people dying on screen. Godzilla's feet look a little smaller here than they did in the original teaser trailer, bringing him back down to size into his original 50-meter perspective. He is estimated to be between 50 and 60 meters in this new movie. I'm thinking that this shot comes after what we've previously seen from the teaser, as there is less of a crowd gathered in front of them, meaning they've probably had more time to disperse or be killed, and the buildings behind him look much smaller here than they did in that teaser, so I think he's further out of town. This could also be on the flip side right before Godzilla enters the main city, which is why the crowds are much smaller. I wouldn't be surprised if this is Godzilla's first official attack in the movie, although if we're following the evolution theory, then this could be Godzilla's first official attack as Godzilla himself, but not his first appearance in the movie. Getting into the teaser trailer itself and breaking down all of these details, the actual full-length trailer will be released at 10:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on September 3rd. This was a teaser for the trailer. Exodus Solidus brought us some analysis that I wanted to discuss. He states that the sea monster that has been reported since prehistoric times certainly exists. It is difficult for humans to overcome and is a terrifying giant beast. I don't entirely know what he's talking about, but he, as well as many others, have noticed that this film expands upon the ideas of the 2014 2014 Godzilla film while going in its own direction. Yasuute provided some analysis as well that gives us some historical context to this film from a Japanese perspective. In this film, scenes appear to be set in February of 1947. The Japanese Coast Guard had yet to be established, and the main warships and weapons from the former Japanese Army and Navy had been confiscated by the United States by this point or disposed of following the war. This is the point in modern history where Japan's military power was at its absolute weakest it had ever or will ever be. The Nagato, Japan's only surviving battleship to come out of World War II and also one of the headlining ships of the war, would have also been sunk by this point during the Bikini tests by now. Akiko Hirose speculates that the United States would be reluctant to provide Iowa-class weapons or rearmament support to Japan during this time, although I personally disagree, but I'll get into that in a different video. That's just an interesting Japanese perspective on this trailer that I figured I'd point out. The Japanese Coast Guard wouldn't be established until 1948, and even then they wouldn't have military might to fight Godzilla with. The JSDF would not be founded until 1954, and so Japan truly would be defenseless unless some other countries, including the United States, who was occupying the country at the time, came to its aid. The July 25th, 1946 Baker nuclear test dealt the Nagato's final blow already at the time this film was set. We'll get into where that date comes from later. This teaser has audio overload as a thundering score that has intense orchestral strikes and a forceful choir sing on. The intense orchestral strikes create this almost ticking time bomb leading into Godzilla's appearance, and the choir adds a religious and mythical level to this song. This song sounds just like the music that plays during the poster teaser reveal video for Godzilla Minus One, making me think that this is a continuation of that specific song and is this movie's new main titles, or our new persecution of the masses, if you will. The new main theme for the film. Throughout the trailer, you can hear many voices scattered over radios. We start out with an English-speaking voice that I've done my best to transcribe what it says. If I'm not mistaken, it appears to say Soviet blank fleet destroyed, which suggests that the Soviets have been destroyed by Godzilla. Then he states USS blank down in the Pacific blank. I'm thinking what this is all building to is Godzilla is attacking many ships in the areas surrounding Japan, not just United States ships, but Soviet ships as well. Anybody who's in his area, Godzilla will be messing with. I'm thinking much like in the movie Godzilla 1984, this is going to escalate those Cold War tensions and bring the world to the brink of war. A scratchy sound sounding slightly similar to that of a seismograph goes off, and we also hear what appears to be a Geiger counter. It's paired with what might be Morse code that I couldn't quite decode, but it almost sounded like it was saying USE, which could be me mistranslating USA or USS. There are also very subtle, thunderous, almost footstep-like sounds coming over imagery of the Bowie turning off and of Godzilla's spines each of the 3 times they're revealed in this trailer, much like the original 4 footsteps that appear in the opening sequence of Godzilla 1954. The ending voice here in Japan mentions Nihon, which is Japan, and then an English voice chimes in saying, "We have made contact." The English voices in this trailer sound intense, scared, and actually natural, like real English-speaking natives. Shin Godzilla came under criticism because of their use of English speaking, and it was not very good. A lot of the people who spoke English in the film were either Japanese, who didn't have a full grasp on the language, or white people who were definitely not Americans or English as their first language, delivering super flat, awkward lines. This gives me the impression that this film might have an international cast that is truthfully international and is able to actually give compelling performances in English. That's exciting. The Japanese Godzilla movies have had a long history of including English-speaking people, so that's nothing new for a Japanese Godzilla film. It's worth noting that other people have different interpretations of the audio played in this trailer. Kaiju number 14 on Twitter translates the beginning audio a little differently than I did. He believes that the audio states, "The US fleet has been destroyed. The USS Newcastle was attacked in the sea." Now, I also hear that. I think that interpretation actually could be a little more accurate than maybe mine, but ultimately I'm going to stick to my guns on mine until I'm proven otherwise, I guess. Why? Because the rest of the video was already recorded, that's why. The trailer starts out with a film reel screeching in, making this feel like real found footage. This builds the historical mystery at play here and adds levels of realism to this trailer. This also ties the teaser directly into the 2014 Godzilla film, which opens with a very similar, near identical historical montage connecting real-world mythology, archaeology, and military operations with fictional ones, and new footage of Godzilla swimming. Director Takashi Yamazaki has not been shy about borrowing from the MonsterVerse. His love for Godzilla expands beyond Japan. Godzilla the Ride has many similar moments to that of Godzilla King of the Monsters, and so having Yamazaki pay homage to Godzilla 2014 here is nothing surprising. We zoom into a photo of a smoking ship. I have some analysis here from D96DD on Twitter, combined with my own analysis here. We may have identified this ship as the USS Columbia CL-56. This is a Cleveland-class light cruiser that saw active combat in World War II. The ship is quite famous and suffered major damage on January 6, 1945, after a near miss from one kamikaze only to be struck struck by a second. 13 people were killed aboard the ship, and the ship was set on fire. Impressive damage control measures were taken, and the ship was able to fight on during this. On January 9th, the ship was struck by another kamikaze, this time killing 24 people aboard. She was able to put the fires out and continue her bombardment, and was able to provide support to other ships. She saved a fellow ship, and her crew was considered to be among great heroes. After this, she continued to see combat and covered Australian troops, and then went on to defend the Chinese Sea. She was decommissioned a year after the war. I'll get back to the real-world historical connections in a bit when we talk about the sinking of this submarine. A rapid shot shows what appears to be new footage, not found footage or stock footage, but new footage made for this movie that takes us under the sea in a way that mirrors the intro from Godzilla 2014, and also calls back to the way that Jaws would take us under the ocean to reveal the dark horrors lurking beneath. The placement of this shot in this teaser suggests that it's an answer to the question of who was responsible for the damage to the battleship in the last shot, this answer being Godzilla. A sonar tracks something large moving towards it. The sonar glitches a few times, and holes open up in it. Maybe the holes represent an island, or maybe it's just showing how technology back in the day was not up to par to compete with Godzilla. It's also entirely possible that the use of sonar is attracting Godzilla to them in the first place, the way that many whales are sensitive to sonar. Sonar has been used to track Godzilla in many films, including the 1998 film when Godzilla does battle with a few submarines. Again, I'll get back to those submarines in a little bit. Overlapping footage here reveals a path being traced across a map of some sort. This is most likely tracking Godzilla's path of destruction left behind in the Pacific. We get an ominous shot of a buoy marked number 9 floating at sea. It flickers on, and then later in the trailer flickers off. The flickering was meant in real life to catch the attention of captains on ships so that they wouldn't steer into them, but I think it could suggest something a lot more ominous here. The imagery of the buoy at sea in a horror film-esque setting is so Jaws that it hurts. This film definitely wears its inspirations on its sleeves. The presence of a buoy means we are most likely near shore, and Godzilla is most likely closing in. However, it could also represent the marking of an undersea mine placed as a way to try and stop Godzilla, perhaps by the United States military in an effort to redirect him away from Japan. We see some sort of tracking signal showing the speed of an object tracing through the void and seemingly closing in on its center. Then this is overlaid with a damage report on a submarine. This could be Godzilla closing in, ranging from speeds of 32 knots to 40 knots, as he arcs in a circular motion around his target. Now you might be wondering, what is his target? Well, I believe we have our answer here. Here's a submarine analysis. Originally pointed out by Seppi on Twitter, this is a damage report from the real-life Tang SS-306. This is a Buffalo-class US submarine used in World War II. Officially, in the real world, she was sunken by her own torpedo off China in the Taiwan Strait. This happened on October 25th, 1944 during active combat. What happened in real life was that the submarine had just escaped a battle where she sunk a few Japanese warships, only to come up under a Japanese military convoy. She opened fire on them and destroyed multiple destroyers and aircraft transport ships. She fired her 24th torpedo, but it wound up curving in a circular motion, not unlike the one we saw in the last shot, and wound up striking herself at the torpedo room. This wound up flooding the ship. A Japanese patrol dropped depth charges on the ship as they sank, and only 13 men were able to escape with their lives using the Momsen Lung. Of the men who went down that night, Reuben McNeil Rafford, who was only 15 years old, may have been the youngest American in the military to lose his life in combat during the war. According to official reports, only 5 of the 14 men who escaped survived long enough to be rescued by the Japanese, who took them in as prisoners of war. It is entirely possible that in the context of Godzilla Minus One, this film recontextualizes wartime incidents as hidden Godzilla attacks and could be building an alternate narrative where Godzilla was alive and involved in the Pacific War. This would completely destroy the created by the atomic bomb theory, and would also go directly against the Godzilla evolution theory and the two Godzillas theory. Godzilla's circular arc he takes in the last shot closing in on his target may be a reference to the path the real-life torpedo took. This could also be a representation of the real-life torpedo itself, assuming this film sticks to real-world history accurately. Godzilla has attacked multiple submarines throughout the franchise history, with 3 of the most notable incidents being his reveal in 1962's King Kong vs. Godzilla and his iconic submarine destruction sequence in 1991's Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. However, I think the most relevant destruction here is the destruction of the Russian submarine in Godzilla 1984 that puts the world on high alert and almost ignites the Cold War. I think similar events are going to play out in this movie. What's possible is that Godzilla could be swimming around around sinking ships, and the United States and the Soviets start to blame each other, but then when they realize, well, it's not one of us, they could turn their sights on Japan and blame Japan, thinking that Japan is the one attacking them, which could even lead to the United States military pulling out of Japan and no longer defending them when Godzilla shows up. We do have some evidence that would contradict that later, but I wanted to pitch it as a possibility here. A quick flash shows a gauge measuring in millirodents per hour. Now, I definitely said that word right, but this is a Geiger counter, and it's spiking. A normal Geiger counter should read anywhere from 5 to 60. This one is spiking all the way to what looks to be 300. That's about as high as the exposure for residents in Chernobyl. The overlay now clearly marks contact, as we see Godzilla may have closed in on that submarine directly. We see a light gauge display counting up. These were electrical devices used to display data in glowing discharges. They, as well as their successor, the Nixie tube, however they're not the same thing, are often associated with danger or disaster, and even appear as the type of countdown clock used in the movie Oppenheimer, which was set in 1945, during the detonation of Trinity. They're not Nixie tubes. Nixie tubes were not created until the 1950s. They're not the same thing. I've seen a few people mistake that, and I wanted to clear that up. The spiking number here powers through the 900s, and maybe another radiation counter, although that would be incredibly high. Maybe that's the radiation spike after the use of the atomic breath, or maybe that's just some other ominous count up. A quick flash reveals a boat sinking offshore of an island. This reminds me of another iconic Toho kaiju film, The War of the Gargantuas, another horrific monster movie that takes the kaiju genre to darker places than ever before. An overlay appears here revealing that this may be a ship marked Dead in the Water near the Kazan Detto region. These volcanic islands, otherwise known as Ogasawara, Tokyo, are a group of Japanese-governed islands and include the very famous site of the Battle of Iwo Jima, a major conflict that occurred during World War II in which the United States successfully liberated the island from the Imperial Army. For those wondering, the Ogasawara Islands are also called the Bonin Islands and are the home to the fictional Odo Island that first appeared in the 1954 film Gojira. The Ogasawara Islands are also the site of Monster Island from the Showa films. The fact that these ships are sinking could be blamed on foreign powers and may cause a rift in governments, pushing them closer to resuming the freshly finished war or igniting the Cold War. It could also be that in this film, the United States has awakened Godzilla at some point, much like in the film Shin Godzilla, and is using the war as a way to cover those up, and all of these documents are now faked as a way to hide Godzilla's existence. Going back to the original photo of the ship sinking in this montage, it could be possible that the land we're seeing in the background is Odo Island. We'll talk a bit more about Odo Island here in a second. A few more flashes reveal damaged ships and eventually what looks to be the sinking of a submarine. Maybe this is even the Tang itself, which truthfully did stick out of the water for a while before finishing sinking. A map of the Ogasawara Islands reveals many mysteries. We then see many ship paths marked, one with the marking Dead in the Water. We also see something with a large impact zone around it. The two seem to intersect, indicating that this could be where Godzilla is located. I actually think the impact zone itself is more of a projection on where this object specifically is, and I think this object is Godzilla himself swimming around the ocean. A further zoomed out photo reveals multiple sunken ships in an area of interest marked in the sea. I think that's Godzilla. There's also a mysterious island here, first discovered by SW Fate 555 on Twitter. The Shimizu Islands are identified on this map, giving an indication of where these photos take place. But the Bayonese Rock, south of Ogashima, shouldn't be considered an island. The Bayonese Rocks are reefs in the Izu Islands that belong to Tokyo. It's possible that in this film, this is where Odo Island is located. It could be that Godzilla was awakened near Odo Island or near Iwo Jima during the events of the war, and the United States is trying to track and study him, resulting in all of their ships being destroyed in this region. Although this explanation doesn't quite explain the sinking of the submarine that happened near China, as that didn't happen near this region. It's also possible that Godzilla is being driven from the Marshall Islands towards Japan following nuclear tests conducted in 1964. However, again, the sinking of the submarine happening during the war does not line up with Godzilla's origins being tied to 1946 anymore. Finally, we see what looks to be a photo taken through a periscope of Godzilla's spines slicing through the water. This image is pulled straight from the beginning of the Godzilla 2014 film and also appears to be relatively tame. The spines we have seen advertised up to this point are typically much larger than this, making me think that the theory that the spines will be growing over the course of this film could be true. A course projection shows a path of sunken ships east of the Ogasawara Islands, tracking northward until it reaches the Kanto region of Japan. This checks out considering this is where the film was shot, with filming happening in Yokohama, Tokyo, Chiba, and many more cities in the Kanto region. This also reveals that Godzilla's course for some reason pivoted directly towards the mainland and also outran all of the United States ships that were tracking and closing in on him. It's possible that the reason he pivoted is because he collided with an undersea mine located near that buoy we saw earlier. It's also possible that due to some mistake, the United States accidentally drove him up there. Or maybe he just wanted to go on land and knock down some buildings. It's always a Godzilla thing to do. It's worth noting that, of course, first projections have appeared in Godzilla films since 1989, with the most notable appearances being in 2014 in Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's 5 in the morning. I've been working on this video for over 12 hours straight now. We're doing great. We see a quick flash of Godzilla's spines now up close, followed by a quick flash of a document to the Prime Minister. Zooming out, we can read the start of this document to the Prime Minister as stating, Office of the Supreme Commander, aka this is from the President's office. It was written in Tokyo, Japan on the 10th of February 1947, giving us a direct date for when the events of this film will be set. We've known for a while that the events of this film would be set between 1945 and 1947, but it's nice to have a definitive date. The document states, our intelligence agency, coordinating with Allied naval forces, has confirmed the presence of a massive aquatic organism headed at high speeds towards the Japanese archipelago from the south. Our blank. It's signed, faithfully yours, Douglas MacArthur. The Allied forces are working together here to identify what's going on, making me think that following the destruction of probably the Soviet something, and a bunch of American ships sinking in Japanese waters, the Allied forces are continuing to team to investigate what's going on, meaning the war really didn't come to a proper end here. It seems they have discovered the existence of Godzilla together, and it's entirely possible that the photo of his spines could be sent to the Prime Minister as a warning of what's to come, and could be taken by the Americans in this film. It's interesting to note here that while the letter recognizes the threat headed for Japan, we don't get to see if the letter says that anybody will be providing defense for Japan. In real life, Douglas MacArthur wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of Japan, Shigeru Yoshida, on February 7th of that year regarding the importance of holding a general election. Yoshida responded with a publicized letter on February 10th. This was the beginning of Japan's democracy. It seems Godzilla will show up and alter the course of history for sure. MacArthur was the commander of the Far Eastern Command and was overseeing the US occupation of Japan and was in charge of the rehabilitation of the country post-war. I wonder if Godzilla will be going to war with him directly. We see a flash of Godzilla's spines now zoomed out again into a mid-shot. This appears to be taken through a periscope of a submarine, probably a United States submarine. I don't think the one that he sinks though. I think this is a different one. It's worth noting here that the visual of Godzilla's spines slicing through the water isn't exactly new to this film. It's been used in many Godzilla films before, but the MonsterVerse definitely popularized it, and not only that, but it directly calls back to the imagery of the movie Jaws, of which this film seems to be borrowing heavily from. So I figured I'd shout that out. The triple whammy of Godzilla photos sprinkled throughout this trailer just reveals that he will be a constant threat and presence in this film and will be behind all else that is going on in this teaser. Finally, we see a release date here, not for the movie, but for the trailer, which is coming September 4th in Japan. We then cut to a title card that reads G-1 in that classic beautiful logo. Both text frames in this trailer are covered in film grain overlays that add to the period aesthetic of them, while also featuring RGB glitches that add a sense of degradation to the footage and makes it seem like maybe the footage is being distorted by radiation itself. Radiation is known to cause real-life degradation to film. How was that? Was I so fast that you didn't comprehend anything, or did you get it all? Sorry, there was so much history to cover there. It's almost like a big war happened and then a lot happened in it, and this movie will be touching on a lot of that. What did you think of all this stuff? Let me know down below. What is your favorite detail from this teaser, and is there anything I missed? If there is, oh my god, what have I been doing? Please comment down below and let me know. I'd love to hear what you guys think of this thing. I am so excited for this movie, and I cannot wait for the full-length trailer to be dropped, and hopefully because I've covered all this on the front end, my trailer breakdown for that can be much smaller. Alright, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one, and the next one will probably be that trailer breakdown. D-Man, out.